How's it going, YouTube? It's your boy Optima, back with another brand new series on the channel, and this is another series that I'm so excited to get underway, and that is no joke because in this series, we're going to be doing some deep dives and going over just what's exactly going on in the competitive scene. I was able to gather some stats and put them all into a spreadsheet so that hopefully we can continue to do this and continue to kind of grow on this, where we actually have some real data as far as how the meta is developing each weekend, because it seems like there's always competitions every single weekend, so we can see exactly where things are trending and hopefully eventually even get stats on the winning percentages of each of these archetypes as well. So yeah, this is a series that I just really wanted to support the competitive scene of this game. I have a lot of hope for this competitive scene to grow into something really big in the esports scene. And yeah, I'm an inherently competitive person myself, and I feel like that's definitely part of the reason why I enjoy this game so much. So yeah, if this is something you think you'll enjoy, make sure to definitely watch the entirety of this video because we have an awesome guest with us today. Definitely a friend I was able to get in the community and just someone I'm very proud of. And yeah, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you get subbed up so you don't miss out on any of the future episodes of Meta Assessment, because here the meta thrives with the deepest dives, and we're going to continue to try to do these deep dives into the stats and what exactly is going on in the competitive Legends of Runeterra scene at any given point. So thank you to anyone who just decided to click on this video. Obviously that means a lot as always. So yeah, we have a great guest today. I think that kind of is enough for me, so let's just get over to getting that underway. Alright, you guys, so in today's video, we have one of the competitors in the Twin Sun podcast tournament that happened last weekend, but only had its bracket round happening. We still have Top Cut this weekend, so I definitely wanted to bring him on to get excited for that Top Cut, but also because they are someone who I've been able to foster a relationship with in the competitive scene, and they're actually the graphic artists for my thumbnails. So any of those good-looking thumbnails you've seen have all been made by them. It's going to be none other than my boy Sneak. So what's going on, man? Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And well, yeah, I want to talk about my experience about the Twin Suns tournament. That I think I did really well for my preparation for that tournament.
Yes, for sure. So Sneak was able to do extremely well in the Twin Suns Open tournament. He was so I think, were you the only one who went 6-0? I could have sworn the next person was 5-1, right?
No, there was other person that
Okay,
do.
there was two people who were 6-0. Okay, I thought you
Yeah,
were the
yeah.
only one, but nevertheless, still, you went undefeated in the open round, 6 games in a row. You were able to win, and he also used a very unconventional, I would say, lineup from what we just kind of seen in recent events and tournaments. So yes, I was just very proud of him because I know he has a lot on his plate with all of his different obligations, especially since he's been helping me with my channel as well. So yeah, really cool. But he is a competitive player for OTK, the One Turn Kill Club. So he is definitely someone who's very familiar with the competitive scene. So it also shouldn't have been too much of a surprise. But yeah, man, congrats on that. Super proud of you. And I can't wait to see what you do this weekend in Top Cut. And you guys can follow the action. There's going to be a link in the description below to the Twitch channel that Top Cut will commence on. They got some great people on mic for that, as my boy Scariggs is going to be on mic. So definitely make sure you follow that link and get followed up over there so you can not miss out on Top Cut. But yeah, I can't wait to see what you do in Top Cut, man. And yeah, I'm excited to also go over these really cool decks that you brought to the Twin Suns tournament, and also just get a little bit more of your detailed insight on why exactly you brought these decks, what you were thinking going into this tournament, what you were expecting, and just a little bit of your preparation practices as well. I think those are all interesting things to the casual competitive player who may not be at your same level. So let's kind of jump right into that. So yeah, what exactly were you thinking going into last weekend, the first weekend of tournaments that we had since the first patch that we got since the Shurima expansion? And obviously it was a huge patch, lots of nerfs, a decent bit of buffs, and yeah, just a lot that changed up. So kind of what was your thought process going in, and how exactly did you come to those conclusions? Was it because of ladder? What was going on to how you kind of came up with, hey, these are the decks that'll work out for me?
Well, at the start when I saw the balance notes, I saw that nerf to Twisted Fate is going to be crucial for the aggro decks. So with that nerf, the aggro decks will come up again, and I was thinking, what is the best counter for that counter deck for that aggro deck? For like example, Nox to hold that cheap groups like the spiders. Well, the answer was Froyo because Froyo have a lot of removal, have the avalanche, have a lot of healing with the catalyst, have the ramp, and one of the most strongest decks right now is the Lysandra deck with Trundle that have a lot of control for that cheap group, and if well that aggro deck can allow take all that damage or not don't have proofs in the arena. Well, talking first about the Frostbite mid-range deck, well, my decision to bring that deck to my lineup is about the Frostbite, of course, and the Reckoning. The Reckoning for me is one card that do very well in this meta against all that aggro decks because they don't have a lot of damage. So if they have all that aggro groups have less than 5 damage, so the Reckoning is gonna destroy all of them. And well, the Frostbite is one of that things that is going to make you survive the mashup. And other thing that decks do really good is all the buff with the Avaros and Hair War or even the Omen Hawk that allow you to for the late game have a really big groups. So the opponent can affront or fight against them because they are going to lose the troops and you're going to get a lot of value about that. And if the game is getting longer and longer and you get a combo with Ash, you can defend my troops with that. That was one of the main reasons that I decided to bring that deck. And one of the changes that I decided to put in that deck is add one copy of Shumpo because I think the rally in that deck do really good and even more with Ash. And only have one copy is enough for me because if you have a lot of rally, that card can be stacked in your hand without using because he's now developing a really good target for the Shumpo. And well, I think that was my reason for bring that deck, and I did really good from in the tournament, and I think that was my best deck in that deck.
All right, that's pretty big. Saying that Frostbite mid range ended up being your best deck, especially because I've seen a lot of people not as high on this deck. So yeah, that's super interesting, and obviously you would know going 6-0 how good it was faring or not for you. So that's really cool to hear. I'm a huge fan of Ash, so I love to hear that, and I definitely can understand how the Reckoning was really messing you up because I've even been messed up by that card when I have played some decks that have like weaker units. That card can come out of nowhere and blindside you. And once again, another downfall of aggro is the fact that it doesn't ever generally run spell denial. It's just trying to get all in your face, so it needs to have just units that are getting in your face or burn generally. It doesn't really run spell denial, so generally if you can get off a spell that really messes it up, you can just blow up their whole plans. And yeah, the Reckoning seems like an easy way to do that with all the 5 mana units that Freljord and this LeBlanc deck can bring together. And I'm also hugely a fan of Rally in the current meta because yeah, there's a lot of aggro, and one thing aggro doesn't want to do is defend. Aggro doesn't want its units doing anything but attacking. So if you can then attack and they don't really block, maybe block what you on one unit and then attack again, that can really mess things up for aggro. And that's not like aggro runs healing. So yeah, definitely something that I could really understand why you wanted to run the one of Shungpo, and then I can also understand why that deck was kind of faring well for you. So really cool to see. Tell us a little bit more about the Lulu Jarvan Shin deck, especially because I've generally just seen Shin and Lulu. What made you throw in the one of Jarvan as well? You can get into that first with just telling us what your thought process was with bringing this deck entirely, and then you can speak on Jarvan.
Well, my main reason to bring that deck because the Barriers deck is very strong. Even with the Fiora nerf, I decided to bring a change for her, and well, The main change for the Fiora deck is the Lauren Protege, is that 3 mana 2/4, so it has the same use of Fiora, but obviously you don't have the win condition of to kill 4 troops to win the game.
Yeah,
And
and
well, they
obviously not having him be your champion means you could run other champions. So yeah, that makes sense.
yeah,
Continue.
yeah, and well, to bring the Lulu is like, oh, that is have that support for the early turns. Like you can have a really good combo if you combo Lulu with a tracker, the 1 mana 2/1 that if you summon another troop, it is going to have challenger. So it will be, instead of a 2/1, it's going to be a 4/4. And for that early turn against that aggro, like you can kill a Lucian, you can kill a Zed, a Shyvana, or something like that without core. That is have a really good combo, and even more because you are running Demacia, you are going to have the sharp side. So that's plus 2/2 is going to defend the tracker, or you can defend the Lulu as well. And well, even with the barriers, you have a lot of defense. And well, for me, the strongest card of this deck is Shen. Shen is a really strongest card, and even if you evolve it, it's gonna be, well, very painful to deal with it for that boost for the groups that have the barriers. And well, the Jarvan thing is because only one copy of Jarvan for me is enough because I don't think that buff that they make for him is really viable for this meta to have to run 3 cups of him.
Yeah.
And and I'm going to use it to in that turn that I need that pressure, that instant pressure that make Jarvan is what I need in some turns. And the synergy that have Jarvan because it have barriers with Shen, it's it's perfect with that moment that uh you need to evolve him. For me, this deck do really good because barriers is as well. It's a very stronger deck. Even more, as I said, Shen is the main K of this deck, and it's and well, I think the meta right now is changing. The people is playing a lot of decks, is testing things, and maybe in the next week this deck is gonna it's not gonna be useful, or maybe it's gonna be the stronger one. We will see with the coming days of how we did in the tournament because the people, as I say, is testing things, is trying to look for the best combination with with this balance change. Well, I think this deck is of course a tier 1 deck because all that removal, all that sustain that have the barrier decks is it's very strong. And if you have if one of the key of this deck is keeping alive your early troops, and if that troops is stay alive for the late game, they're gonna destroy you because you are going to have a lot of value because that deck is about that. It's about taking value about the trades. I think all the decks do really good. One of the things that I was thinking, when I did the lineup, is think about that. Well, Agri's gonna be strong, yeah, but with this nerf that's happening in the last balance, Lee Sin will come back to the meta. And then one of the counter for Lee Sin is the Tamraka deck with Tamkesh and Soraka, and that's the other reason because I bring Ashe for the lineup because that cooling strike or that uneven the reckoning is going to it's not going to allow that deck to work out because you're not going to have the troops for it. And even the frostbite kill the same because it can do the kick to your nexus with your troops.
Yeah, that's actually super fair. So yeah, really cool to hear. And like I said, once again, these are cool decks. TLC, I'm not the highest on, but really cool decks. And yeah, I agree with that. I think that yeah, we're gonna continue to see decks like Tom Soraka, considering that lots of aggro, and when you have these like beefy defensive units that aggro just can't really fully get through, you could just outpace it, and especially because of the fact that aggro has to attack to be doing it, to do what it wants to do. That's kind of playing right into Tom Soraka's game plan. So it also makes sense as to why that deck can be viable as well. And then we obviously got some other things that are trying to pop up in the meta, such as Deep, such as the Aurelian Soul Demacia deck, which is just use healing. It wants to heal out all of the aggro attacks and then win in the late game with an Aurelian Soul. So, or with Zoe if it is running Zoe, because I've seen a lot of Leona builds. So yeah, we'll have to see which one of these decks continues to reign supreme. I feel like the aggro decks are still getting really figured out as to which is the best. We had a lot of variance this past weekend in how many different aggro decks were being played, so it'll be interesting if that starts to minimize and as people figure out which feels the best. And then especially as like Nightfall aggro is really gaining some popularity. And then we will also have to see if which of one of these, like a little bit more control-ish decks, mid-range decks, which one of those will really rise to the top, whether it be like Lee Sin, Zoe, or one of these builds that you brought. But yeah, I love that these were the decks that you brought. I loved the variance that we saw over the weekend with all the different decks that were good. And yeah, let's hop a little bit into these stats. So if you could pull up that Excel document that I threw over to you, let's take a look at that, and just I want to get a little bit of your thoughts on what exactly stands out. This took way longer than it should have. Microsoft, I guess, just hates me, as I was just having some really weird technical issues with this working, but we're here now and we got it sorted, and I was able to get some stats from the Twin Suns Open, the LBR Series Qualifier 2, OLS 23, and then the Fistcock Cup, the first one ever that they ran, and put all those together and put them into a kind of a little bit of a database. So I think this is pretty interesting. I was obviously able to get these the Twin Sun Open stats from a user on Twitter. I'll definitely make sure to put his Twitter handle on screen somewhere. I just don't know it off the top of my head, but shout outs to him for providing this. I think this information needs to be provided more to the community, because knowing what's happening in tournaments and what people are bringing is so huge from being able to build upon that. Because we all know it, the ladder and actual tournaments, they function so differently. So we need to know what's working in tournaments as opposed to the ladder. And we're able to get some awesome stats here, as Spider Aggro was the most brought deck to the Twin Suns podcast, followed by Zoe Lee, followed by TLC, followed by Scouts, so obviously Misfortune and Quinn, followed by Discard Aggro, followed by Nightfall Aggro, and then we get that Soul Demacia deck, some Sand Scouts, some Tom Soraka, like we were alluding to, and then Lulu Shen sitting at 9, definitely more than I anticipated, and then some Pirate Aggro, your Frostbite mid-range at 7, some Deep at 7, some Zoe Karma that didn't perform well apparently, some Shurima Overwhelm, Scargrounds, TF Fizz only at 6, so a huge drop-off for TF Fizz. In the first weekend, obviously, everyone wants to try out the new shiny toys, and things that got buffed and nerfed, or things that got buffed mostly, not nerfed. So it makes sense that there was some drop off, but very substantial. You know, most people still care about winning at the end of the day, so if they thought it was really, really good, I think we would have saw more of it in this tournament. And then Thresh Nasus sitting at 5, not a ton of Thresh Nasus. And then some Draven Edge, Shin J4, Puff Caps, Mono, Azir, some Azir Noxus aggro, and then Fior Shin dropping off almost the face of the earth at only 2. And then Aphelios Bilgewater, literally a deck that was so oppressive prior to Aphelios and TF getting nerfed. We saw none of it in the Twin Suns podcast. So really crazy to see how much things got shooken up in the first weekend of tournaments after post the most recent patch, which is our first patch of the Shurima expansion. So anything stand out to you with those numbers? Did you expect that much Spider Aggro, especially considering how well it's doing on the ladder? Did anything catch you by surprise by these numbers?
Well, to be honest, the aggro decks they are going to prevail in the meta right now, even in the competitive or in the ladder, because there is no TF. There is not a lot of bunch of TF decks there, and well, the red card is one of the main counters for that cheap groups, because the spider decks have a lot of 1 HP troops, so one card will kill that deck. But how TF is not there in the meta right now, well, that kind of decks are perfect.
Yep.
For example, and the only counter for that, if we are talking about the competitive, is like TLC because you have a lot of removal. You have the avalanche, the whale, and then if you're going to bring a full aggro lineup, you'll have to ban that deck that is going to counter all your decks. And well, TLC is the best example for that. And well, Soily is well. I was expecting that to come again to the meta because there is not that really pressure and well the age of the dragon that bring you that support with that dragon with a life steal to survive the early game. And if you bring the listing with all the spells that you have, all the healing, because you have the healing touch, you have the star shaping.
Yeah.
That aggro damage is not going to be enough if you getting late and late in the game. And well, TLC is not a surprise. It's really a stronger deck right now, even more for the combo with Listanda. The Watcher is definitely the best card right now because you can't stop it if it comes to the ground.
Yeah, I agree. Either that or Lee Sin. Those feel like the two most oppressive cards. And generally, if you're oppressive, you're pretty strong. So, yeah, I'm going to have to agree with that one.
Yeah. And well, Scouts, well, do very well in the early game because Scouts is a counter. It's a counter for the aggro decks
Yep.
because Misfortune, because you can defend the attacks of Scouts if you have Misfortune.
Yeah, aggro is forced to try to kill Misfortune immediately, and waste possibly their burn, their get excited or something on Misfortune, because yeah, she's that oppressive towards aggro decks for sure.
Yeah, or even a Fervor, and
Yeah,
you want to use the Fervor to hit the face.
yeah, you only want to do that on the Nexus. When you start to have to do it on other stuff, it's very much so against your game plan for sure.
Yeah, the Nightfall aggro. Well, I really like that deck. I played a lot of that decks in the past, and I think it can have a lot of potential when the day pass and they found a really good list or a really good lineup to bring it up
Yeah,
because
yeah, that
you
deck is
have you
definitely
have
still
the
being figured out.
sustain. Yeah, you have the sustain of the Doom Beast. You have all that come with the Nightfall, the Pale Cascade, and you have the Diane for all the removal cards or champions that you need to kill. And
Yeah.
well, I think it's a really good deck. And well, with that deck, you have the finisher with an atrocity if you did that enough damage. Your next.
Yes, sir. I'm such a huge fan of Nightfall aggro. I feel like it's actually one of the only aggro lists that I actually don't get bothered with. I feel like Riot knocked it out the park with everything aesthetically with Nightfall aggro. Like I love Nocturne's level up. I love Diana's level up. And I love the little like moon sound and a little moon crescent that goes over your cards when Nightfall is active. I just think they knocked all those cards out the park, so it's just never really bothered me. But other aggro decks, get that out of here, especially discard aggro. But discard aggro is definitely in a really good spot right now. I don't know. I think discard aggro, there was a lot of it, and I think it'll just continue to be high as far as aggro decks because I just think it's one of the most versatile ones and the hardest to stop. Like when they just get rid of their whole hand and Jinx gets leveled, and Jinx can feel very oppressive at times. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
discard's in a good place. So we'll have to see what reigns supreme. But good to hear that you kind of expected most of what happened. Because yeah, it allowed you to be a little bit more better prepared going into things with having a good expectation for what exactly was going to be at the top. Because yeah, we got a lot of Spider aggro since it was doing well on the ladder. We got a lot of Zoe Lee since it's kind of counter to aggro with all the healing Targan plus Ionia can kind of accumulate together. And then we got a lot of TLC, which you brought, considering that it's just all about removal with that deck. So those were the three most prevalent decks. Those ones were all able to make it into the top 10% of the used decks over the first week of tournaments. Let's take a little bit of a look at the LBR series qualifier. And the LBR, TLC was the most brought deck, so definitely a decent bit different from the Twin Suns Open, where even though there was a lot of TLC, it was not at the extent of being the most brought. It was actually a little bit down from that. But then lots of Zoe Lee, a decent bit of that Asol Demacia, so not a huge surprise there. Targan has enough healing to be able to heal on its own. It doesn't need Ionia, even though it likes it. So yeah, Asol, heal up, and then you drop down that Asol, so definitely no surprise there. A little bit more of that Tom Kinch Soraka that we were alluding to, and definitely more Frostbite mid-range, which is a deck you're very high on, so cool to see as well. And then a decent bit more of Thresh Nasus. And I'll say that was a deck I expected to see just a little bit more of in the Twin Suns Open, just because I don't think that deck's in a bad place. I know that it doesn't really have a lot of healing, and it doesn't necessarily remove things in the same way some of the other decks do, but I just think they're being like, even though there is some very viable Targan decks, I still think it's not as nearly as prevalent as it's been. So there's not a lot of hush to stop the atrocity into Nasus, and that deck just kind of, it's also kind of aggro-y in the early game, so it can kind of get all in your face to where you have to focus on either healing or something else, and then all of a sudden there's a huge Nasus on the field that they're just trying to atrocity into, and you may not necessarily have an answer if you're not running Lee Sin Zoe, because that's like the only good spell denial right now, since there's not really any good Shurima decks outside of Thresh Nasus. Like Shurima Overwhelm is still kind of hanging in there, but I don't know, I see that deck getting kind of pushed out the meta. It doesn't feel as strong, and I unfortunately brought that myself, but it actually still got banned every time, so that's still a deck people are afraid of for sure. But what's your thought process there? How do you feel on Thresh Nasus?
Well, for me, Thresh Nasus is not a bad deck. It's really strong because it did really good against the aggro because Thresh. Because if you develop Thresh to the board, well, the opponent need to be sure to kill it before he evolve, because if Thresh evolve, you're gonna have a really huge Nasus every time, because if you are facing a aggro deck, all the troops in they're gonna die for a wave, for a box. You have a lot of response, answers, or counters for that kind of decks. So I think it did it can do really good, but the main turns, or the first turns, it is gonna suffer a lot because you don't have a really good proof to defend yourself, and you only have spells, and you can only use like the battlefield or the whale. But right now, I don't know. The time will say what will happen with that deck. But I see a lot of potential if we run a lineup with a lot of control decks.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and I definitely agree with you. There's definitely some answers in there as to why it can still find its place in the meta, and yeah, I think also Nasus's level up, if it does manage to get leveled up, is very oppressive as well to aggro with like the -1 to its attack. Like that aggro does not want to see that happen at all. So yeah, definitely some tools in its kit for aggro. I feel like it's almost those other matchups where it can feel like it's not as strong, such as like the Frostbite. Like that deck hates getting frost, like the actual getting frozen. It hates that so much. And I was playing a little bit of Frostbite mid-range. It was just a little different, some severe Ash, and yeah, I never felt that afraid of Thresh Nasus, just because I could always with Ash kind of frostbite right into the Nasus even through its spell
Yeah.
shield, and then they can't atrocity. So I feel like it's the other decks other than the aggro decks that make Thresh Nasus not feel as great, but I think it's something to keep an eye on. I could see that deck maybe making a little bit of a move upward, but we'll definitely have to see as things move along, and as people once again, as they clearly try to find what is the actual optimal aggro deck, or if they at least can figure out what 3-1 if they want to run the 3 aggro lineup. But yeah, other points I actually just want to make was one thing about the Twin Suns Open. They were supposed to have 120 participants. Unfortunately, they only got to 80. So just something keep in mind, people. A lot of work and effort goes into these tournaments. So make sure if you sign up for something, you're not going to be able to make it, to try to allow others to partake in it, because we are still up a developing competitive scene. So the opportunity to play in a tournament is a pretty big deal for a lot of people. So let's just try to be kind to the people who put all this effort behind the scenes to get these tournaments, and make sure we can alert them, hey, can't make it, let someone else take my spot. Because that was a little bit of disappointing to see, especially because I did sponsor that tournament as well. But nevertheless, it does happen. And moving on, though, we had OLS 23, which we only were able to get top 8 of, because unfortunately no one keeps the deck list for all of that. But in the top 8 of OLS, there was TLC, Zoe Lee, Spider Aggro, Nightfall Aggro. All those had 3. And I don't think any of that surprises us. There was a Frostbite mid-range that made it in there, some Deep, some Pirate Aggro, one Shurima Overwhelm, some Draven Ez, TF Fizz, and Nivea, which is surprising to see, because Nivea to me almost just feels like a worse Freljord deck than TLC. I may be wrong, but that's just what it feels like to me. So
No, I
surprise
agree.
there.
Because you see, it is really late to get a comp, because you need to have a turn 10 to bring an Nivea to be strong.
Yeah,
While that happens, if you're facing a TLC and at turn 8, you're dead, because you're not going to have your deck
yep,
for the washer.
yeah,
So it's really low to play Anivia right now.
yeah. Yeah, it's just a little too late. I don't know, for me in the game to start getting that card on the field and then doing stuff with it. But I don't know. We may see people start to maybe try to make a Nivea work if they don't want to use the Watcher. But yeah, that was a little bit of a surprise to see such a huge tournament getting a Nivea lineup in there. But um, yeah, unfortunately, hopefully moving forward, as I continue to try to do this and provide this for the community, we can get the full deck list for OLS, because obviously OLS runs some of the most consistently high turnout tournaments. So getting a little bit more of their numbers would be very good for our perception of what's kind of going on in the meta. Nevertheless, shout out to Fistcock, who was able to run his first tournament, the Fistcock Cup, and that had a 51 participant turnout with some definite top players. So really cool to see that. And yeah, there was some Zoe Lee was the most brought deck. Some discard aggro was very prevalent in that tournament. Nightfall aggro getting shown a lot of love. TLC, Spider aggro. And yet, just one thing to keep in mind was that the LBR Series 2 qualifier, that happened on Thursday, whereas all the rest of this happened over the weekend. So it's just interesting to see, as the LBR only had 2 Nightfall aggro decks, and then the Twin Suns Open, we have 13. In OLS, we have 3 in the top 8, and then in a Fistcock Cup, we have 10. So the meta is definitely still developing, as you can see just how drastically different that turnout is just a few days later in tournaments. And I think there was another deck, yeah, that showed a little bit signs of that as well. I can't put my finger on it. But Spider Aggro, yeah, to an extent as well. There was 3 Spider Aggros in top cut of OLS. There was 19, obviously, of them brought in the Twin Suns Open, and 8 in the Fistcock Cup. And there was only 4 in the LBR. So once again, just another deck that was really, really getting more oppressive, or just more strong, as the weekend started to come across and more people wanted to give it a chance. So definitely some very interesting numbers here. I just really quickly also wanted to look at the a little bit more stats from the Twin Suns Open, and we were able to see that Zoe was brought to a lot of. Let me go over to that. There we go. So yeah, Zoe was brought to a lot of lineups in the Fistcock Cup. There was literally 30. I mean, in the Twin Suns Open, there was 33 Zoes brought, easily the most out of any champion, and Zoe had a pretty good time as well, having a over 50% win rate. So very interesting to see there. Some misfortune, tons of scouts, lots of misfortune. Draven. Very interesting to see that these were the most brought champions, I would say, for sure. But the biggest win rate has to, when you look at that Lissandra and Trundle sitting at 58%, just really shows how dominant of a weekend that TLC really had in the tournament. And then you go a little further and you see Lulu, 10 Lulus were brought, and they amassed a 61% win rate. So that's just where I'm really interested to see how Lulu fares as the meta continues to develop, and just where exactly, like, where is where can Lulu really go? Is the sky is the limit? I'm just very excited to see there. So yeah, just some last stats I wanted to look at, but that I think kind of wraps up everything we wanted to mostly discuss in this one. Once again, shout outs to you, Sneak, for having a great success story in the Twin Suns Open as going 6-0. That is something to just be extremely proud of, and you were able to do it bringing some less than conventional deck list. TLC, lots of it, but I feel like the other two aren't nearly as prevalent. And I wish you the best of luck this weekend in the top cut, and I'll definitely be rooting for you, cheering you on, and watching you play. So hopefully you can put on a show for everyone. And once again, link in the description to the Twitch channel where that will commence, and I'll also hopefully put somewhere on the screen what time it will be. I just don't know off the top of my head, but make sure you guys are there to support. And yeah, did you have any final thoughts? Where do you have any like hot takes or anything on exactly? Do you have any champion, any archetype that you think is gonna like maybe that people are sleeping on that's going to be better, or any one that you think's overrated? Is there any deck you think's overrated or underrated that we should be on the lookout going into tournaments this weekend?
Well, I think one of the decks that are coming back to the meta right now, and people have to take care about it, is about Azul.
Yes, that Asol Demacia deck for sure.
Yeah, because there is a really good combination of regions, because you have the really good cheap spells like of the Masha, like the Sharp Side, the single combat, and you have the sustain of Targon, and you have a really good finisher that is Azul for the late game. So I think that is one of the decks that the people need to take care for the next future tournaments.
My apologies, you guys. I just accidentally had my mic muted for the last little bit of this video and wrapping things up. So nevertheless, thank you so much once again, Sneak, for your time with us. It really means a lot for me that you took the time out to do this. And once again, amazing run. Congrats on that in the open round. And I can't wait to see what you're able to do in Top Cut. And if you guys, once again, definitely go support. Go into the description of this video. Go over to Twitch. Get followed for the Twin Suns podcast. Not only will you get some amazing podcast content, but then you can also make sure that you're there and watching Top Cut of an amazing tournament ran by some amazing people. So I would definitely appreciate if you guys could go and do that. And I also just wanted to give a special thank you and shout out to tournament organizers. Just such an essential part of any growing competitive scene. And yeah, sometimes they just don't get enough love and enough people just showing them that we appreciate them. So thank you, tournament organizers. You guys are the real MVPs. And yeah, taking your time out each weekend and providing these tournaments is definitely something that I am very gracious for. So thank you guys. And lastly, yeah, this is a series that I have some very long-term ambitions for. So if you guys enjoyed this, if you want more of this content, please definitely support it. That would really help. And if you watch to this point in this video, you also are the real MVP for that. And just know that the meta thrives with the deepest dives. So that's what we're going to continue to try to do here. But I will see you guys in the next one. That's going to be it for me. Peace out.